Tensions rise in Washington as Senator Wyden accuses the Trump administration of actions he says are harming everyday Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, it's April 15th in America. Tax day, and Americans have gone through all kinds of headaches associated with filing their taxes. Adding to the headache, millions are frustrated that Republicans, and the Trump administration specifically, killed the direct file program for the year and put those workers back at the mercy of the tax software giants who overcharge for a service that ought to be free. It's a reminder that Donald Trump operates pretty much the entire government on the same basic corrupt approach to benefit himself and his friends, to punish people he dislikes, and particularly to degrade public service. Does it no matter the cost to typical people. His handling of the IRS is a perfect example of all three. Direct file in America died on Mr. Bisignano's watch. Shutting it down was a big gift to the Republican allied prep giants who lobby relentlessly. I've remembered years when they spend millions lobbying for the status quo rather than giving Americans a shot at what people have all over the Western world, which is a simple way to file their taxes because the government already has the information. So these rent seekers are engaged in a multi-billion-dollar ripoff year after year, and unfortunately, Donald Trump is on their side. So he acts continually in self-interest. Right now, he's suing the IRS and the Treasury Department for $10 billion over the leak of his own tax returns. During his second term, his administration is violating the exact same taxpayer privacy laws that underpin his lawsuit by illegally leaking tens of thousands of taxpayer records to ICE. Hypocrisy is not the only problem. There's a conflict of interest for Trump's staff at the Treasury Department, IRS, and DOJ. And it's an enormous one. The powerful and unstable men they work for is suing the agency they lead, and they're in charge of deciding whether the taxpayer, the American taxpayer, would be on the hook to pay up. I believe this is a depth of corruption that would have been unthinkable during the first 248 years of our history. Now it seems to be routine stuff for Donald Trump. So let me talk briefly about the IRS's data sharing agreement with ICE. I have been warning for a year that this would lead to serious mistakes and violation of taxpayer privacy laws. That is exactly what's come to pass. There is a strong likelihood that this system misidentified taxpayers and sent ICE to hunt down innocent people who may now be sitting in camps or worse. This is not an overstated danger. Countless families have had their lives ruined as a result of the Trump mass deportation campaign. 46 people died in ICE custody since January of 2025. There are a lot of reasons to protect taxpayer data. One reason is it helps to promote trust in our system. If people believe filing taxes will lead to their abuse or detainment by the state, they aren't going to comply. Non-compliance is a disaster. It criminalizes people who would otherwise be on the right side of the law, and it also drives up the deficit. Those may be the unspoken goals of this administration as Donald Trump and Republicans seek to justify mass deportations and further cuts to essential priorities like health and food stamps. Now, on the subject of degrading public service, there is little doubt that the numbers will show IRS customer service has gotten worse as a result of DOGE and Trump layoffs. The Trump administration's decision, for example, to phase out paper checks for tax refunds has caused real problems and delays for millions of vulnerable Americans. These are people who don't have bank accounts to take direct deposits. It was pretty obvious this situation was coming, but the IRS did no outreach to avoid it. Now a whole lot of Americans who count every spring on timely refunds to make ends meet are in trouble. With filing season ending, I'm sure the committee is going to hear some Trump administration spin about the whole refund question. The reality is the tax law is a dud for the vast majority of working people. Refunds aren't anywhere near the original Republican goal. Any benefit people get from the law is swamped by inflation resulting from tariffs and additional costs with the war in Iran. The people coming out on top, as is always the case, are the super wealthy. Millions of people have found that the Trump economic agenda is a loser for them. The most regressive economic policy that they have ever seen. I'm going to close on this. This committee has held a filing season hearing on many occasions. To my knowledge, this is the first such hearing where the witness has no real authority to talk about the subject because they don't actually have a Senate-confirmed role at the IRS or the Treasury Department. Mr. Bisignano is called the Chief Executive Officer of the IRS. My view is this CEO job is fake. It's an end run around the vetting process for a real nominee, which is a way for Donald Trump and Mr. Besson to have direct control over the IRS. As for Mr. Bisignano, his recent appearances before the Ways and Means Committee sure didn't do much to convince anybody the IRS is in good hands. Even the Republican side of the dais in the other body was unsatisfied. Now, he's got an actual job running Social Security. And by the way, that's another agency in crisis due to mismanagement. I believe the individual with us, Mr. Bisignano, ought to be focused on cleaning up that Social Security mess. Over the past 15 months, the administration laid off more than 7,500 Social Security employees, which worsened Americans' access to their earned benefits and gave DOJ free rein to pilfer their most sensitive data. As of a few weeks ago, we learned that a former DOJ staffer downloaded onto a personal thumb drive a copy of one of the Social Security's tightly restricted databases of Americans' personal information. So my colleagues and I have repeatedly urged the chair of this committee to hold a hearing to dig in to these important issues. These issues for working families and for seniors and disabled are just about the most important thing in their lives. But Republicans, no hearings. Basically just no. I don't think that's right. This is Mr. Bisignano's first appearance before the committee since his confirmation last May, and it's not even focused on the agency that he was actually nominated to lead. I find every single bit of this unacceptable. So we got a lot to do here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
The hearing opened with Senator Ron Wyden setting a strong tone, tying his remarks to the significance of Tax Day in America. He highlighted the frustration many citizens face during filing season and used that moment to pivot into broader concerns about recent policy decisions. By grounding his argument in everyday experiences, Wyden framed the discussion as one directly impacting working families rather than abstract political debate. A central focus of his criticism was the elimination of the direct file program, which he argued made tax filing more difficult and costly for millions of Americans. Wyden suggested that this decision disproportionately benefits private tax preparation companies while leaving ordinary taxpayers with fewer affordable options. This point reflects an ongoing debate about whether essential services should be simplified and publicly accessible or remain partially dependent on private sector solutions. Wyden also raised concerns about data privacy and enforcement practices, particularly regarding information sharing between government agencies. He warned that such actions could undermine public trust in the tax system, emphasizing that compliance relies heavily on citizens believing their information will be handled responsibly. The broader implication is that once trust erodes, it can have long-term consequences for both governance and revenue collection. Another key theme was the issue of conflicts of interest and accountability within government institutions. Wyden argued that overlapping roles and legal disputes involving top officials create complicated situations that could affect decision-making. While these claims are part of a larger political disagreement, they underscore the importance of transparency and clear boundaries within public service. In closing, Wyden expanded his critique to include concerns about the management of major federal agencies and their impact on vulnerable populations. He pointed to service disruptions and policy changes that he believes are making it harder for people to access benefits and support. Whether viewed as a policy critique or a broader political statement, his remarks reflect the high stakes involved in decisions that affect millions of Americans.